This is chapter 10 on photosynthesis. So the purpose of photosynthesis is to convert light energy into food. This is usually stored as glucose, as a simple sugar, or more complex carbohydrates, starches, cellulose, things like that. Carbon dioxide plus water, with the help of light, enzymes, and chlorophyll, yields one glucose molecule, oxygen, and water. And actually, in this equation, you can take out the water here and reduce this to 6 waters. This is usually how you see the equation written. You don't usually see water on both sides, although water is a product. It's just in the reduced form of the equation. You don't usually see that. So 6 carbon dioxides and 6 waters, with the help of light, enzymes, and chlorophyll, will yield 1 glucose molecule and 6 oxygens. And obviously, when a plant is doing photosynthesis, it is doing this a lot because it is producing way more than 1 glucose molecule. There are 2 types of organisms that are autotrophic. If you don't remember from Bio 1, autotrophic means they can make their own food. They don't have to consume it. Heterotrophs would be things that had to consume their own food. They're ones that are photosynthetic because they make it from the sun. Notice photo means light. And chemosynthetic, which make food from other inorganic molecules. So chemo, think chemistry. They're using some kind of chemicals to make their own food rather than light energy. Usually we find these things in deep oceans where there is no light. And so the bottom of the food chain, the autotrophs, are not photosynthetic, they're chemosynthetic. There's 2 main steps to photosynthesis. The light reactions, and the dark reactions. I'm having trouble today. The light reactions are the light-dependent reactions. They need light and chlorophyll to make ATP and NADPH. I know we talk about cellular respiration making energy, or ATP. A little energy is made during photosynthesis as well, but it's still not cellular respiration. It's not the main purpose of the process is not to make ATP, but some needs to be made because some needs to be used. Then what is made in the light reactions will go to the dark reactions, or also known as light independent, because they're independent of light. We'll take those materials made during the light reactions plus carbon dioxide that the leaf takes in to make the actual sugars. So the first step here is using the light. You need the light to make things that then go into another part of the chloroplast to actually synthesize or make the sugars. And so here's kind of a summary of this. There's obviously light coming in into the light reactions. This happens in the thylakoids of the chloroplast. This whole thing is the chloroplast. And this is a thylakoid. I'm not sure I'm spelling it right. Water is also taken in at this step. So light and water are going to yield NADPH and ATP, sorry. And it's going to produce oxygen here. The products of the light reactions right here are going to go in through the Calvin cycle, and that is going to take in carbon dioxide as well from the atmosphere and the products of the light reactions, and those are going to go through and they're going to generate sugars. Okay, they're going to generate your glucose and your complex carbohydrates. Then they're also going to spit out NADP plus and ADP, which are going to go back into the light reactions. And notice that this is missing the hydrogen, which will be added during the light reactions. And then this is missing that extra phosphate, which will be added back during the light reactions to again generate ATP and NADPH. And so these 2 things cycle through these 2 reactions. They cycle through. The things that are constantly needed are water from the outside environment, carbon dioxide from the outside environment, and the things that are produced are going to be oxygen and sugar. These are the reactants in that equation, and these are the products. Now, it's a common misconception that in photosynthesis you also need soil or minerals, and that's really not true for actually physically doing photosynthesis. Now, to make a plant healthy and grow, they are going to need some minerals oftentimes. There are some plants that don't need soil. For example, think of the Alodia that we use in the classroom. That's an aquatic plant. It doesn't actually require soil, or like a bamboo or something like that. This shows a little bit more detail of what's actually happening in some of these reactions. The light reaction consists of photosystem 2, photosystem 1, and then a couple of electron transport chains. Interestingly, it lists photosystem 2 before photosystem 1, and that is because photosystem 2 actually happens before photosystem 1. Why is it not photosystem 1 and then 2? And that actually has to do with when they were discovered. This photosystem was discovered first, so it was named photosystem 1. This one was discovered second, so it was named 2, and then they actually figured out that photosystem 2 happens first. Again, you've got the ADP and NADPH going in. This shows a little bit more detail as far as a couple of things that are also needed during the Calvin cycle. We're going to talk about those here in a little bit, so I'll just address that later. And this is a form of energy. So let's look at the excuse me, the structure of a plant. So this is a leaf. If you take a cross section of a leaf, as thin as it looks, there's actually a lot of layers here. A couple of the things that are important for us: xylem and phloem, guard cells, and then the opening here. I don't know if I hope it does label it. Is called the stoma, and then the guard cells open and close the stoma. The stoma is really important for allowing the carbon dioxide in. An opening in the usually in the underside of a leaf. There can also be some that are on the upper leaf, but usually more on the underside, and then allowing oxygen out. And then you've got just multiple layers of cells here, and this is just showing a microscope view of the layers of the cells here. You can see the guard cells with the stomata opening. And this is showing the stoma. I can't remember if we're looking at them in class or not in one of our labs. We did look at them in Bio 1, so those of you that took Bio 1 probably remember that. I always think they look kind of like corn nuts under the microscope, but this is going to be opening right here. That's the stoma, and then there's a guard cell there, and then there's a guard cell there. So leaf parts that were kind of in that diagram, the cuticle, it's very waxy and it provides protection from insects, environmental damage, et cetera, keeps water from getting out. So it's just a protective coating. The epidermis is the defense or the barrier. It reduces water loss. It's also, again, kind of providing protection. It's like your skin. These are just a couple of the mesophyll layers. Lots of chloroplasts there, so this is where a lot of that photosynthesis is taking place. So you can go back. Nope, apparently it doesn't let me go back. Oh, here we go. So those mesophyll layers, those are the ones right in here. And then the stomata that I talked about, the openings on the bottom of the leaf, there can be some on top, typically more on bottom, depending on the type of leaf. A leaf that lays in water, like a lily, I think has more on top because otherwise it's completely submerged in water. Lets carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. It also lets water out. That's called transpiration, the loss of water from leaves of plants. But typically these openings, these stomata, need to be closed enough so that we reduce them. Otherwise the plant will lose too much water. So I talked about guard cells that surround the opening of the stomata. They open when water flows in by osmosis. What triggers the stomata the guard cells to open the stomata? Light, because that means they're going to be able to do more photosynthesis. They notice a decrease in carbon dioxide because they want to open up and allow more in. And then they have internal clocks, so timing of day, seasons, things like that. Potassium enters the cell, the water potential decreases, and then water is allowed in. The cells become turgid, and the stomata opens. This is actually how that stomata opens, that process of getting it to open. The mechanics of it, I guess you could say. And then closing them, the triggers for closing them would be no light, because they're not going to need, they're not going to be able to do photosynthesis, so closing it is going to reduce that water loss. Increasing temperature, because again, increasing temperature is going to negatively affect them in losing water. They lost too much water, or an increase in carbon dioxide, because then they don't need as much, so they can, because it's available, so they can close up a little bit. So how do they actually close? Potassium leaves, osmosis, so water moves out, the cells become flaccid, and the stomata close. And this just shows a diagram of that, of what we were talking about with the potassium in the water. So here's your stomata opening, and then potassium out, water out, it's going to open up, so on and so forth. It's going to close up here, sorry. This one's going to open up. The chloroplast is the site for photosynthesis. It's actually where it happens in the organelle. The membranes, the thylakoids, I think I did spell that incorrectly earlier. Within the chloroplast, give it the ability to build up concentration gradients for whooshing or chemiosmosis. Well, I'm having a hard time getting the page to go. There we go. Okay, let's break down the reactions. The light-dependent reactions. The light energy, or something called photons, are going to be absorbed by pigments. Remember, the main pigment is going to be chlorophyll in the thylakoid membranes. So going back to your diagram, let me go back very easily. That's going to be right in here, in the membranes here. Those are where the light reactions are going to happen. So chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, those are going to be your biggest pigments. They actually absorb these wavelengths of light. They reflect green, which is why you see green plants. This just shows a couple of diagrams indicating that same idea, that they absorb right here in the violet blue range. Sorry, they absorb the least. They're green, which is why they reflect green, and we see the color green. The photosystems are the light harvesting units. Photosystem 1 has chlorophyll at P70, and photosystem 2 has chlorophyll at P680, which is a shorter wavelength of light. So if you can go back here, I'm sorry, what were those numbers? I need to pull them up. 700 and 680. So 700 and then 680 on wavelengths of light. Pigments absorb the light energy and transfer the energy to other pigments until it is absorbed by a photosystem. The photosystem will gather enough energy to raise one electron to a higher energy level, and then that's going to be used for the electron transport chain. Cyclic photophosphorylation. So break this down a little bit. Cyclic means cycle. Photo means light. And phosphorylation means adding phosphates. It's an electron transfer with photosystem 1. Electrons from photosystem 1 go through an electron transport chain, very similar to what you would have seen in cellular respiration, and create ATP. The electrons are then going to go back into photosystem 1. The electrons are basically just going to be cycling, cyclic photophosphorylation. This is not enough energy for most plants, and it shows a diagram down here of that happening, of cyclic photophosphorylation. Non-cyclic phosphorylation, electron transfer with photosystems 1 and photosystems 2. So then photosystem 2 is going to gather light energy, which raises electrons to, again, the electron transport chain, and then ATP is going to be made by chemiosmosis. So think about cellular respiration and chemiosmosis and that. The electron goes to photosystem 1 and then is raised to the second electron transport system. NADP is going to be reduced to NADPH. Remember when that overview diagram that was in there. Electrons in photosystem 2 are going to be replaced by photolysis of water. So here is a diagram of all that happening. So light energy coming in, being absorbed, going to raise the electrons energy level. They're going to be transferred down the electron transport chain, and that's going to keep basically happening. Got some NADPH that's going to be produced and sent into the light independent reactions. And remember, you've got this is chemiosmosis, ATP synthase. Then we go to the light independent reactions, or sometimes called the dark reactions. This actually occurs in the stromal surface of the thylakoid, so not inside the membranes. Need to have enzymes, ribulose biphosphate, or RUBP, which is a type of sugar. Carbon dioxide from the air, NADPH, and ATP. Where'd you get these things? Well, enzymes and RUBP are things that the plant's going to make that are going to be used. Carbon dioxide, remember, is going to come from the air. And then remember, NADPH and ATP came from the light reactions, the non-cyclic photophosphorylation. Okay, so then let's talk a little bit about the Calvin cycle. Oops. Carbon dioxide fixation. So you take carbon dioxide plus 6 are the RUBP, and that's going to create six carbon molecules that are unstable. So they're going to be split into 12 3-carbons. So if that makes sense, we've got, I am not an artist, but we've got carbon, 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 carbon. So if this were a 6-carbon molecule, you're going to have 6 of those. Okay, so that's not going to be stable. So they're going to be split into 12 3-carbons. So think about like a 3-carbon chain. You're going to have 12 of those. And those are called PGA. Then each PGA is phosphorylated by ATP. Phosphorylated meaning adding or subtracting phosphates, and reduced by NADPH into 12 molecules of PGAL, phosphoglyceraldehyde. Regeneration then of RUBP, 10 of the 12 PGAL remake RUBP because we need that for the next reaction. You also need ATP to make that. And then 2 of the 12 will make 6-carbon sugars. That's actually going to be glucose. And then glucose is then used later to make I have a hard time writing and saying at the same time, carbohydrates. Your more complex ones. So this just shows you what's going on in that Calvin cycle. Remember, you're taking in ATP, you're going to be producing some ADP, which will go back and remake more ATP. You're going to take the NADPH in, and we're going to reduce that. We're going to be making glucose as a product. And then we have to remake RUBP as well. There's just lots of diagrams here trying to kind of get you to understand what's going on. Do you need to know the names of the 6-molecule carbohydrates or the 3-molecule protein? Absolutely not. You do not need to know that. You need to understand what's coming in and what's going out of the process. Nope. No. Oh, nope. Where did I go? Okay, so looking at kind of an overview of the difference between cellular respiration and photosynthesis. So what's the purpose? Well, in cellular respiration, what we really want to do is we want to convert stored chemical energy, or our glucose, to ATP, because this is actually what cells use as an energy source. It's kind of like I can't give you a chunk of coal and your electricity is going to work. You can't plug in your hairdryer to a lunk of coal. It actually has to be converted in a power plant, and that's the idea of cellular respiration, is it's converting what you eat into ATP or usable energy. Or for a plant, it's going to convert what it makes because they don't eat glucose, they make it. Photosynthesis is going to convert solar energy to glucose. Who does these things, or what type of cells do these? Every living cell is going to do cellular respiration. Anything from a bacteria or a yeast up to plants, animals, fungi, everything. Because if you can't convert either what you make or what you eat into ATP, it's going to be useless for you. And then photosynthesis is going to be photosynthetic autotrophs or chemosynthetic organisms in the ocean. Where does it happen? Cellular respiration happens in the cytoplasm or glycolysis, and then into the Krebs cycle, into the mitochondria membranes. And then photosynthesis happens all in the chloroplast. And then what are the overall steps? Light-dependent and independent for photosynthesis. Glycolysis, intermediate step, that's where we turn pyruvate into acetyl-CoA, which goes into the Krebs cycle, and then we have the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis. So, kind of looking at large picture here as far as the environment and exchanging with the environment, the sun is going to provide plants the ability to do photosynthesis, which is going to produce glucose and oxygen gas, which is good because for us as people or animals, you're going to need the oxygen gas, you're going to need the glucose, and then you will be able to do cellular respiration, and then therefore you produce ATP, which means your cells can do work. And then as a byproduct, we're going to release carbon dioxide, which is going to be great because the plants need carbon dioxide to go back and do photosynthesis. When you look at it in plant perspective, they're going to do photosynthesis, they're going to produce glucose, and they're going to produce oxygen, and then they're going to use that glucose to go back into cellular respiration. They actually produce oxygen too, which is going to be used for their own purposes of doing cellular respiration. And then they're going to be able to produce ATP, and they're going to be able to do work, and that's the cycle of it. And that's the end of these notes. And hope not